My name is Claire Whitmore, and for 33 years, I was the backbone of a family that never once said thank you. I didn't notice it at first. After all, as a child you don't count how many times your parents praise you, or how often your siblings acknowledge your sacrifices. But standing there at my father's funeral, holding the folded program in my hand, watching everyone nod solemnly at my eulogy, it hit me like a slap. Not one person in my family looked me in the eye and said, "Claire, we appreciate you. Claire, we're grateful." Instead, my mother gave all the credit to my brother Daniel, who hadn't even visited Dad in the hospital. "He was always the strong one," she whispered to the priest, ignoring the months I had spent caring for Dad through the chemo, the endless hospital runs, the nights I slept on a chair by his bed. I remember clutching the program so tightly my knuckles turned white. Not again, I thought. Not this time. It wasn't just grief pressing against my chest, it was rage, coiled and burning, waiting for the right moment to ignite. I grew up in a small town in Nottingham, the eldest of 3. My brother Daniel was the golden child, charming, reckless, a magnet for attention. My sister Lily was the baby, coddled and excused for every failure. And me. I was the reliable one. The one who did the dishes, ironed the uniforms, stayed late at school to help with plays, picked up after everyone. Whenever Daniel crashed a car, my parents scrambled to cover his debts. Whenever Lily quit another job, they praised her free spirit. When I got scholarships, worked 2 jobs to put myself through university, or landed promotions at work, the response was always the same. "Well, that's what we expect from you, Claire." Expectation. Never gratitude. I thought adulthood would change it. I thought building a life in London as a corporate events manager would finally earn me respect. Instead, it made me their personal ATM. "Claire, the boiler broke again. Could you send some money?" "Claire, Daniel's kids need school uniforms. You know how expensive things are." "Claire, Lily's flat deposit fell through. You're the only one who can help." And I did help. Every time. Rent, medical bills, tuition, even bail money once when Daniel got drunk and disorderly. I told myself family comes first. I told myself this is what love looks like. But at Dad's funeral, hearing my mother fawn over Daniel while ignoring everything I had done, it cracked something deep inside me. 2 weeks after the funeral, I invited them all to my London flat. It was the first time I had hosted them in years. I prepared everything. Catered food, wine, a clean and warm space with a view of the Thames. I thought maybe, just maybe, they would notice. Instead, Daniel complained about the traffic getting into the city. Lily mocked the modern art prints on my wall. My mother asked if I had really needed such a big place all for myself. Not one of them thanked me for the meal. Not one said, "Claire, this is lovely." The breaking point came when Lily pulled me aside, glass of Merlot in hand. "You know, Claire, you should really be doing more for Mum now that Dad's gone. Daniel has the kids. I've got my own struggles. You're the strong one. You always manage." Something in me snapped. I smiled politely, but inside I was already crafting a plan. A plan to make them feel the weight of their selfishness. A plan to finally show them what happens when the reliable one stops carrying everyone else's load. I wasn't just going to step back. I was going to make them crumble. I began with silence. For the first time in my life, I let their calls go unanswered. The first few days, my phone buzzed constantly. Daniel needed money for a late mortgage payment. Lily had lost another job and couldn't cover her rent. Mum wanted me to pay for the handyman to fix her leaking roof. Normally, I would have jumped, transferring money within minutes. But this time, I didn't respond. I watched the messages pile up, each more desperate, each tinged with irritation that I hadn't fixed their lives instantly. By the end of the week, the tone shifted. Daniel left me a voicemail filled with curses. Lily accused me of being selfish, saying I was abandoning them. Mum texted, "I raised you better than this." That line stung, but it also fueled my resolve. Raised me better? No, she had raised me to be a servant to everyone else's chaos. Still, I knew silence alone wouldn't be enough. They had taken me for granted for decades. A few missed calls wouldn't change anything. They needed to feel true consequences. They needed to feel powerless. I began with Daniel. He was reckless with money, constantly in debt, but still had the audacity to sneer at me as if my success was handed to me. I had covered his gambling debt twice in the past year. Quietly, I contacted the creditor I'd dealt with before. I told him I would no longer be Daniel's safety net, and that if Daniel used my name again, I would take legal action. The man chuckled darkly. Your brother's in deep already. If you're cutting him off, he's going to drown. I simply replied, then maybe it's time he learned to swim. Next. Lily. She was used to calling me every time she lost a job, expecting me to pay her rent. I called her landlord myself and explained that I would not be responsible for any future payments. But she always said her sister covers her, the landlord said, sounding surprised. Not anymore, I told him. If she can't pay, you'll have to treat her like any other tenant. Finally, my mother. This was the hardest. For years, she had manipulated me with guilt, using words like family duty, love, and sacrifice as shackles. I wrote her a letter. I told her that I loved her, but love did not mean servitude. I reminded her of the countless times I had been there, quietly, reliably, while she praised Daniel and excused Lily. I told her I would no longer pay for her comforts while being treated like an afterthought. I sealed the envelope with shaking hands, but once it was posted, I felt lighter than I had in years. The backlash came quickly. Daniel showed up at my office, red-faced and shouting. How could you cut me off, Claire? I'm your brother, he spat. I stood calmly in the lobby as security watched him. Exactly, I said. You're my brother, not my dependent. Handle your own mess. His face twisted with rage, but beneath it, I saw fear. For the first time, he realized I wasn't going to save him. Lily was no better. She called at 3 a.m, screaming that she was being evicted. You can't do this to me, she wailed. I'll be homeless. I took a breath before answering. You had years of chances, Lily. I've paid your rent more times than I can count. Maybe this will finally force you to stand on your own. She hung up, calling me heartless, but my hands didn't shake this time. Mum's response was quieter, more insidious. She called me with a voice full of tears. Claire, I don't understand. I thought you cared. You know how hard it is for me without your father. You've always been the strong one. Those words again. Always the strong one. Always the one who carried everyone else. I swallowed hard, but my voice came out firm. Mum, I care. But caring doesn't mean destroying myself so you can ignore what Daniel and Lily have become. I won't be your crutch anymore. There was silence on the line. For the first time, I had stunned her into speechlessness. And in that silence, I felt something shift. Power. Control. For once it was mine. But this was only the beginning. Revenge isn't just about pulling away. It's about showing them the life they could have had if they had ever shown gratitude. And I had the perfect plan. I started laying the groundwork quietly, methodically. If my family thought I was just going to vanish into the background, they were mistaken. I wanted them to feel the emptiness I had filled for so long. And the best way to do that was to let the world see the truth about them. I began with Daniel. He always bragged about being a successful entrepreneur, but I knew the truth. His business ventures were nothing more than gambling schemes and unpaid loans. I gathered every receipt, every transfer I had made to cover his debts. Years of bank statements, carefully highlighted. Then I reached out to a journalist I knew through work, a woman who specialized in financial scandals. I didn't give my name, just handed over the documents anonymously. A week later, an article appeared in the local paper, Community Businessman Exposed, Decades of Debt and Family Bailouts. Daniel's smug image crumbled overnight. His friends stopped returning his calls. The fathers at his kids' school whispered when he walked by. For the first time, he had to face the reputation he had built with his lies. Lily was next. She prided herself on being the free spirit, the fun one, the life of every party. But behind the scenes, she lived off others, especially me. I still had copies of her eviction notices, the endless emails where she begged me for money, the proof of every transfer I had made on her behalf. I didn't go to the press for her. Instead, I went to her circle of friends. I created a carefully curated folder of screenshots and documents and sent it from an anonymous account to each of them. The subject line was simple: the truth about Lily. Within days, her phone calls changed tone. No more arrogant demands, only desperate pleading. "Claire, my friends won't talk to me. They say I used them, that I lied. Did you do this?" I simply replied, "Actions have consequences." But my mother was the hardest. She had always worn the mask of martyrdom, the long-suffering parent who gave everything for her children. In truth, she had given everything to Daniel and Lily, while draining me dry. I knew exposing her wouldn't work the same way. She thrived on pity. So I chose a different path. I cut off her lifeline. I had been secretly covering her utility bills for years, paying for the gardener, even slipping her cash when she said pensions weren't enough. I stopped it all. I made sure every company redirected bills directly to her. When she called, panicked about late fees, I told her calmly, "Mum, I can't keep doing this. You'll have to figure it out." At first, she tried the guilt. "Your father would be ashamed." Then the anger. "You've become cold, Claire. Ungrateful." That word made me laugh bitterly. Ungrateful. From her. The irony was delicious. Eventually, the panic set in. Without me, she had to face Daniel and Lily for help. And they, stripped bare by their own scandals, had nothing to give. One night, I received a message from Lily. "Mum's house is going into arrears. Daniel can't pay. We don't know what to do." I sat on my sofa, sipping wine, reading the words over and over. 4 years, I had been the invisible safety net. Now, the net was gone, and they were falling. And I let them. Weeks turned into months. Their calls grew less frequent, not because they had stopped needing me, but because they had finally realized I wasn't coming to the rescue. I watched from a distance as Daniel sold his car to pay creditors, as Lily bounced between couches with no one left to exploit, as Mum's proud face at church wilted under whispers of unpaid bills and neglected responsibilities. I thought I would feel guilt. I thought I would lie awake at night questioning if I'd gone too far. Instead, I slept deeply for the first time in years. The weight of their needs, their endless ingratitude, had lifted. And in its place was clarity. But revenge wasn't complete yet. I wanted them to not only suffer, but to know why. I wanted the words they had never spoken to finally leave their lips. I wanted them to say thank you. And for that, I had one final move. I waited until Christmas. For years, I had been the one to host, to cook, to buy the presents that made everyone else look generous. This time, I didn't send invitations. I didn't call. I simply sat in my warm London flat with a glass of mulled wine and let the silence stretch. At 7 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was Lily. "Where are you?" "Mum's furious, Daniel's drunk already, and everyone's asking where the food is." I smiled to myself before answering. "You thought I'd host again? Pay for everything again? Not this year." Her voice cracked through the line. "Claire, you can't just abandon us on Christmas." "I didn't abandon you," I said softly. "I just stopped carrying you." And then I hung up. That night, I posted a single photo to my social media. Me in front of my fireplace, a plate of food, a glass of wine, and a caption: "Peace tastes better than sacrifice." Within minutes, relatives began commenting, some supportive, others shocked. But my siblings saw it, and so did my mother. I wanted them to. The fallout was swift. By New Year's, Daniel showed up at my flat uninvited. He looked thinner, angrier, a shell of the man who once strutted through life on false bravado. He pounded on my door until I opened. "You ruined me," he hissed. "That article destroyed everything. My kids hate me, my wife left. Was that what you wanted?" I stared at him evenly. "What I wanted was for you to take responsibility for once in your life. Everything in that article was true, Daniel. I didn't ruin you. You did." He clenched his fists, but for the first time in my life, he looked small to me. Defeated. And I felt nothing but calm. Lily came next. She arrived 2 weeks later, eyes red, carrying a plastic bag with her clothes. "I've got nowhere to go," she whispered. "No one wants me anymore. Please, Claire." I let her stand in the cold for a long moment before I spoke. "Do you remember all the nights I sent you money so you wouldn't be homeless? All the jobs I helped you apply for? And you laughed at me behind my back, calling me boring, predictable? Now you want shelter from me." Tears rolled down her cheeks. I didn't mean it. I was jealous. I shook my head. "No, Lily. You were ungrateful. And this is what ungratefulness buys." I closed the door slowly, leaving her sobbing in the hallway. And then, finally, Mum. She called late one night, her voice fragile, a shadow of the woman who once scolded me for not doing enough. "Claire, the house. It's too much. The bills, the repairs. I can't manage without you." I listened in silence. For once, she filled the space with pleas instead of commands. "I know I didn't say it enough. I know I should have told you more. You did everything for us, Claire. Everything. And I never thanked you." Her voice broke. "So thank you. I'm saying it now. Thank you." I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase the years of neglect, the decades of expectation without gratitude. But it was something. And for the first time, it was her chasing me, not the other way around. I didn't rush to her rescue. I didn't offer money or solutions. I simply said, "You're welcome," and ended the call. That was the moment I knew my revenge was complete. They were broken, humbled, stripped of their illusions. They finally saw me, not as the endless giver, but as the one who had been holding the family together all along. And when I looked at my life, my peaceful flat, my career, my friends who valued me, I realized something even sweeter. I didn't need their thanks anymore. I had given it to myself. If you enjoyed this revenge story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Weeks passed after that Christmas, and the silence from my family became its own kind of music. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waking up to frantic messages, guilt-laced calls, or last-minute demands. My mornings were mine. I drank coffee without dread curling in my stomach. I went for long walks along the Thames, breathing in the winter air, realizing how light freedom actually felt. But freedom wasn't the only reward. There was satisfaction too, sharp and intoxicating, in knowing I had forced them to face reality. Daniel was stumbling through odd jobs, stripped of his title as a businessman. Lily was finally working, part-time at a cafe, no glamorous parties, no handouts, just her own effort. And Mum, well, Mum had sold the big family house. She had moved into a smaller flat, humbled and quiet. The martyr act no longer fooled anyone, not even herself. I didn't cut them out completely. Revenge wasn't about vanishing. It was about balance, about rewriting the roles. So I answered their calls sometimes, but on my terms. No longer the savior, no longer the fallback plan. When Daniel tried to complain about money, I interrupted him. "What's your plan to fix it?" I asked, and then stayed silent until he stammered out an answer. When Lily whined about long shifts at the cafe, I simply said, "That's called life, Lily. Welcome to it." And when Mum tried her old lines, "You've always been the strong one," I corrected her. "No, Mum. I was the used one. There's a difference." It wasn't cruelty. It was justice. Justice wrapped in honesty they'd never dared to face. And slowly, I noticed something extraordinary. They began to change. Daniel started budgeting. Lily kept her job for more than 6 months, the longest she'd lasted anywhere. Mum stopped comparing us, stopped praising one child at the expense of another. For the first time in decades, there was balance. Fragile, imperfect, but real. One evening, months later, we sat together at Mum's new flat for dinner. A small, simple meal. Nothing like the grand Christmases I used to fund. We ate quietly, the tension still there, but less sharp. At the end of the night, Daniel looked at me across the table. His voice was rough, awkward. "Claire, I know we've been awful. I know I took you for granted. I want to say thank you. For everything." The words hit me harder than I expected. My throat tightened, but I didn't let tears fall. I only nodded. "You're welcome." And then Lily whispered, "Me too. I never realized how much you carried until you stopped. I'm sorry, Claire." "Thank you." Even Mum, stiff as ever, placed her hand over mine. "I was blind for too long. Thank you, Claire. Truly. It wasn't a perfect ending. Nothing erases years of neglect with a few words. But hearing them finally acknowledge the truth was the sweetest revenge of all. I walked home that night under the London lights, a quiet smile on my face. Not because I needed their gratitude anymore, but because I had forced them to see what they had ignored all my life. My revenge wasn't in their downfall. It was in reclaiming my power, in making them say the words they thought I'd never deserve. And I realized something else. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's simply teaching people what life looks like without you. If you enjoyed this revenge story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Months turned into a full year, and the echoes of that final confrontation still lingered. My life had grown quieter, richer in ways I hadn't imagined. Without their endless demands, my career flourished. I finally took the promotion I had been hesitating on, because I wasn't worried about how much more they would expect if I earned more. I traveled, Paris in the spring, Santorini in the summer. Trips I had always postponed because someone in the family needed saving. I began painting again, something I had loved as a teenager but abandoned when responsibilities swallowed me whole. My apartment became filled with color, with canvases that told my story, not theirs. And my family. They were surviving, even if survival looked different for each of them. Daniel was no longer the charming golden boy. His reputation in town had been permanently scarred. He worked a modest job at a car dealership, no more grand talk of business empires. Sometimes he called me, and though his voice was still rough with pride, there was humility there too. "I'm making it, Claire," he said once. "Not much, but I'm making it. On my own." That was a victory greater than any article could bring. Lily surprised me most. The cafe job turned into a manager role, and for the first time, she seemed proud of something she had earned herself. She even called to tell me, "It feels good, Claire. Hard but good." I had waited years to hear those words from her lips. Mum had softened. Age had finally humbled her, but so had the loss of her pedestal. She no longer pit us against each other. When we gathered now, the air was lighter, less poisoned by comparisons and guilt. She often looked at me with eyes full of something I'd never seen before, respect. It was late, maybe too late, but it mattered. The sweetest part of my revenge wasn't their downfall. It was watching them rebuild without me as their crutch. They had learned the hardest way possible what it meant to take me for granted. And they had learned, finally, to say the words I had longed for. Thank you. I stood one evening on my balcony, the city lights glittering like 1,000 tiny promises, and I whispered to myself, "You did it, Claire. You finally made them see." Revenge had not destroyed me. It had freed me. It had turned me from the family's invisible servant into the woman who taught them the value of gratitude, the cost of entitlement, and the strength of silence. And as I closed the chapter on that long, bitter story, I smiled at the future. One I had written for myself, with no apologies. If you enjoyed this revenge story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Years later, I can still remember the silence after I finally let go. Not the silence of being ignored, but the silence of freedom. My name is no longer whispered in my family only when they need money or saving. Now, when they speak of me, it is with respect, sometimes even awe. They learned the lesson the hard way. Gratitude isn't optional, and love without it turns into exploitation. Daniel eventually remarried. His second wife told me once at a family gathering, "He talks about you a lot. Says you were the one who forced him to grow up." I looked at him across the room, playing with his children, humbler, and I realized he had finally become the man he always pretended to be. And though he never said it outright again, I knew in his own way, he was still thanking me. Lily built her life too. The cafe became her pride, and she turned it into a small catering business. She invited me once to taste her menu, and when I walked in, she hugged me tighter than she ever had before. "I'm sorry it took me so long to get it, Claire," she whispered. "But I do now. Thank you for making me stand on my own." I smiled and told her the truth. "It was never about punishing you, Lily. It was about setting us free." And my mother, old age had softened her sharpest edges. She never regained the grand house or the pedestal she once stood on, but she gained something better, clarity. On her birthday, sitting in her modest flat, she held my hand and said, "You were right, Claire. I see it now. I see you. It was late, yes. But those words healed more than I expected." I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had kept giving, if I had stayed their safety net. I know the answer. Nothing would have changed. They would have continued using me until there was nothing left. By choosing revenge, by pulling back and letting them fall, I gave them something far more valuable than money. I gave them the chance to grow. And I gave myself something too. A life unburdened, a voice finally heard, and the power to define my own worth. I am Claire Whitmore, the woman they once overlooked, the woman they called boring, predictable, reliable. Now I am the woman they thank, the woman they respect, the woman who taught them that silence can be the sharpest blade of all. And so my story ends not in bitterness, but in balance. Revenge was never about destroying them. It was about reclaiming myself. And I did. If you enjoyed this revenge story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. I no longer measure my life by what I give away, but by what I build for myself. For too many years, I thought being indispensable was the same as being loved. I thought sacrifice equaled worth. But when I stopped, when I cut the cord and let them feel the weight of their own choices, I finally saw the truth. Revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's patience, distance, and letting silence do the work. My family expected me to bend until I broke. Instead, I stood tall and watched as they stumbled without me. Only then did they learn what my presence had truly meant. Only then did they utter the words they had withheld for decades. Thank you. And here's the secret I carry now. I don't need those words anymore. I don't need their validation to know my worth. Their gratitude, when it came, was a victory, but my real triumph was realizing I never needed it in the first place. My peace, my strength, my freedom, that was always mine to claim. Today, I live a life that is wholly my own. I still see them, yes, but on my terms. I choose when to answer, when to show up, when to give. No more obligation. No more chains disguised as family duty. When they look at me now, they don't see the invisible servant. They see the woman who walked away and came back only when she decided to. And maybe that's the sweetest revenge of all. To not just make them crumble, but to rise above the rubble, untouched, unbent, unbroken. So if you're listening to my story, take this with you. Never let anyone convince you that love requires sacrifice without gratitude. Never let them make you believe your strength means you owe them your life. Walk away if you must. Stand tall in your silence. Let them feel the void you leave behind. And one day, they'll finally understand your worth. If you enjoyed this revenge story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from.